Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to another podcast where I, with Josh DePold, will discuss some of the features of the future for humanity. And as you know from this channel, I call it the future humanities in plural. Why do I call it future humanities? Well, it all goes with the different timelines and the different prospected futures that we are in the middle of creating in these, as everybody says, very exciting times. Now, that sounds very new agey, and you know I'm not new agey. What I need Josh to do with me today is that he needs to ask me the right questions. So that's why I have Josh with here instead of just me doing a talk on my own level, because what I want to do with this podcast and hopefully turn into a series of podcasts, which is why I strongly suggest you subscribe, you like and subscribe and share. Please share. We need to begin the sharing. I know I for years have said not to share due to the circumstances of the last 5 years that we were in, where it was a good idea for the ones who knew where to go that they would go on their own. But we are in different times now. We are in the disclosure times that will lead to different prospected future timelines where humanity needs to do different types of choices. We need to explore what it means to be human, and we need to explore what it means to be an expanded human operating from what I call the double awareness, both within the base program settings as well as connected to the higher order reality fields. Others call these the other dimensions, multidimensional awareness, or however type of terminology that we would like to use. I would like us not to get stuck in the words themselves, because words have a tendency to create what we could say specific thought forms that leads us into specific paths of ideas, and with that also into different reality programs. With that said, it also means that what I'm here giving of suggestions and discussions with Josh is that could also be seen as a quote-unquote program, that could also be seen as a type of timeline, and that could be seen as a kind of an alternative timeline to the already existing timelines that's out there. For those of you who haven't done my classes on the whole academy yet, or the perception logs, there's a lot of where am I talking from, what's the information I'm giving, which faction do I belong to, is it the alien agenda, what's going on. And this is where I will try to put it into from as many different angles as possible. And that's why this hopefully podcast series, if we are allowed to continue to do so, will be called Building Bridges for Better Futures in plural, meaning several bridges and several better futures. Because when we talk about timelines and what is possible, then it all depends on what we do as a collective. And that's where I want to address some of the topics that Josh and I are going to talk about here. And he's going to ask the questions. He's going to a little bit go into the role of being a representative of, if we could call it humanity, if you like, we could call it some kind of planetary council or something that goes in and asks the questions as we have seen it in the US congressional hearings and other places. There are people who have knowledge. There are people who have encounters. I'm one of them. There are people that have been part of different types of programs, whether it's within the military programs, the secret projects, or is outside. And I have been kind of pushed into some of these programs back in 2017 and onward, which was not a good experience. And I've been spat out again because I'm not the material that they are looking for. Because I am here on my own type of mission statement that I instigated a long time ago, as many of others that are doing the progression work, that are doing the awakening material, that are activating, that are for now perhaps seeing themselves as neurodivergent, but in fact are part of the new humanities that have been seeded on our planet within the different human projects. Some of them pro-humans, others against humanity. And what does it mean to be against humanity? Well, it technically means, as those of you who are familiar with my material, you know that there are different factions that are trying to get access to our solar system and recolonize it because it has been colonized already the last 15,000 years. So the good question is, how do we operate within the new prospected futures when we don't know what they are, when we have no clue of what it leads to? And I've talked about some of the time travelers from the future that has already played out in the first run-throughs, in the New Reality for Earth podcast, as well as in the New Reality for Humanity, where I talk about some of these traveling back to avoid some of the already played out futures. These are called run-throughs. This is also where I have my information. And again, we could say perhaps are being shown these horrible futures, as we know from, for instance, Jim Sparks, who were pulled in as part of some of the alien abductions that did happen, not just as part of the dark or black projects that have been going on within the military, the secret military operations, but actual from other groups that came here and were showing him that our planet were being destroyed, that we were not taking care of our planet. And some of these groups that did that, both of them, some of them were from parallel systems, but others were also part of the existing, what we could call colonizing factions, where the maintainer grays were the only ones that were left, began some of these abductions under what we could call, in terms of the bigger scheme, an attempt to try and assist humanity in making different choices. So it all comes down to, we can't rest in the technology. We have the rollout now of the UAPs, where we begin to understand what is it and what's that about. And people ask the questions, well, is it all about the technology? And I said I got that when I went to Australia. I had one of the old world order ants coming in from the fourth dimension, and instead of focusing on the spiritual or new age programs, the awakening programs, quote unquote, go in, follow the technology, look at the technology. And I was pointed, and at that period, when I was in Australia in 2017, 2018, I was shown these different types of already inserted alien technology that most people are not really aware of actually is alien technology, including the understanding of the implementation processes of the event program, which is, or was, because it didn't play out as it was supposed to, a new version of a reality program that was implemented to change the collective consciousness of humanity. My goal of my work and everything I'm doing here is to try and change the collective consciousness. Because at the end of the day, it comes into humans themselves and what they want to see in the future, who they see themselves to be in the future, and what kind of future that they want to have. And this is, for me, when we talk about exciting times, most people talk about this as if something is happening for them, as if the law of the cycles will ensure that this beautiful future will blossom after a little bit of a crisis or convulsions or some kind of obstacle that humanity will blossom their way through, so to speak, by enduring these crises, these changes, that they will come out on the other end and have done the transition in these processes, which is definitely a possibility. We know we grow from challenges. We know we grow when we are pushed out of our comfort zone. And we know that we are growing when we are psychologically challenged within our narrative of who and what we think we are. And that's the rollout of the UAPs and the slow implementation of these different secret programs that's been going on since the 1950s. What I'm here saying is that these programs are part of the transhuman agenda that is not our best friends. So that's the future I want to avoid. One of the futures I want to avoid is the one where humanity, blindsided in oblivion, are led into these futures as part of, quote unquote, a better future for all in their version, for the commonwealth and for the greater good of whatever they are producing, which means that they are creating a future that supports their falling system, that supports their worlds that are now losing their viability rate. And that means that they no longer are connected to the original holographic-energetic grid structure of the universes that we're part of, and with that lose the potentiality of continued growth. Once we lose the connection to the original holographic energy systems and the grid works it's connected to, And I talk about that in the transition sciences on the whole academy in my course material there, and how to do that and what the sciences are behind that. Then once we lose that potentiality, then we begin to regress. And then we begin to go into what we call entropy and evaporation processes, where our original holographic energetic units begins to crystallize. And once they begin to crystallize, because they are not being fed with viability, they're not being fed with life force or energies that are connected to consciousness units of the original racial lineages, which is the next challenge that we're going into from 2025 until 2034, where this will be activated for us to activate, clear it out, and integrate whatever's left of these original solar system, civilization, consciousness potentials. So this is the better future for me, where humanity will be able to learn how to do that. And that's what drives me in this process of what's important, what is it that we need to do. And my angle is there. It's not tunnel vision, because I look into many different perspectives, but the solution is for me single, and that is recall who and what we are, begin to do the holographic energy unit architecture, repair modalities and systems. Sorry about that. I was going to say something else. But doing the repair work of our original holographic energetic architecture, so that we learn how to self-heal, we learn how to self-scan, we learn how to work with our higher order fields, or a multidimensional architecture, whatever terminology you like to use, that are connected to the true worlds outside this enclosure. So the point of this podcast is, in a way, and if I'm allowed to do more than this one, is to try and take you by the hand, because many have said, how do I do this? How do I do this? What's the solution? What are the answers? And I've been trying to find the solutions in my whole academy class material, where I have given the best to what I know right now could be the solution. But at the end of the day, similarly as we know with the environmental challenges, whether they are orchestrated or real, whether they are an effect of the collapse of the original reality program technologies, which is my take on that one. And it's amplified by the effect of the collapsing of the original or inserted original artificial programs in the sun that were connected to the hijacking races and their technology. So we're having this collapse of the original reality technologies. And that's the first step that I would like to address in the understanding of our reality, not just as an enclosure or a prison, because it has many different functions. For some races, it is an enclosure. For others, it is a prison. For others, it's literally a dumping ground where they drop and dump what they don't want other places. And I'm here talking holographic energetic energy systems. We could call that souls. Souls have been dropped here that are not fruitful for whatever project the other civilizations are doing in our quadrant, that are part of some of the regressed races and are trying to find ways to repair their own energy system using our reality field, the original restoration program, as their laboratory for these projects. They're called human projects. So if we begin to understand the huge scientific and experimental social dynamic experiment that's going on our planet from that angle of many different features, and understand this is like a little bit, if we look into some of the newer movies of the island, the new interpretation of that one, where you have both some of these holographically induced reality programs that run subconsciously, some are in stasis and are being inserted into clone body in this reality. Others are here on different types of soul contracts. Others are here because they were dropped here as part of the colonizing enslavement of other civilizations. And many different forms. So just say our planet is the hub of all of these possibilities. So when we talk about solutions and strategies, we kind of get blindsided and entangled a little bit like in a spider's web, because there's not one way out. It's like being in the center of a spider's web. We're stuck there, and we're seeing all of these different angles and all of these different potentialities of what we can do. So when I now begin this podcast series, which I really, really hope that the different groups that are here will allow me to do, because in a way it is a discussion where we're trying to involve humanity. Let me put it in a different way. When we talk disclosure, what would be the purpose of disclosure? That would be to involve humanity. We know from the old controller programs that the saying was always amongst the brotherhoods that the children should not be let into the deeper secrets because they're not ready for these high level types of information. It will harm them more than it will benefit them. Similarly, as if you have a 3-year-old that is at the beginning of creating his or her personality structure. Remember, I'm a psychotherapist, again, remember that one too. So I will draw in psychodynamics in the inner work. But it is like having a 3-year-old that has begun its personality structure, but still highly driven by the limbic system and karmic imprints, from where the choices are not really choices, but will be what's called the path of least resistance. That means that the human runs on the karmic imprint of past lives and what it has made of choices in other lifetimes here and beyond. So there really is no free will when we talk about that. There are what we need to clear out of the past that, like a parachute, keeps us on timelines where we used to operate. That has been taken in by the colonizing races as part of, we could say, the restoration program did fail. It did fail. It was taken over by other races because it failed already before we got hijacked, because of decisions that were made by the planetary councils at the time. So it's politically, exopolitical, we also having issues there that we need to address. So that's another level that needs to be looked at. So in a way, when I want to go through these different levels of information, that also ties into the Atlantean project. What was that about? The Lemurian project, what was that about? And all of these different projects that's been going on in our reality field as part of the restoration program, or as part of the hijacking, quote unquote, their restoration program, that has led to, in later times, what's called the harvesting programs. Why was that even allowed if we have different benevolent races around us? Why did they allow that? So what I want to say here is that this is not where you get the whole quick fix in 45 minutes. This is where I would like to exopolitically educate you. I would like to invite you into a responsibility of the reality we're part of, from the angles of exopolitical, extraterrestrial, extra-humanity, so to speak, from the now already existing humans that are now, as things are situated on the planets around in our solar system. We have got civilizations that are from this planet of humans that travel there on Alpha Cygni, I think it is, the swan. They are there now already as part of some of the, when the Dracos pulled out, they followed with them to that reality. They had been reverse engineered and enhanced to be able to exist there. So we have already got human space travels that have done the interstellar movie trait, abandoning our planet and now operating in other reality fields. We already had that at the time of Atlantis, where others left this system and got repositioned in the Andromeda system. So we have many humans from different eras of our planet that have traveled other places and are now coming back from the future, trying to undo these timelines that have grown out of the failed projects, that have grown out of the enslavement programs, that have grown out of the imprisonment programs, that have grown out of the scrapyard programs, where different souls are dropped here and part of the different experiments that have been done here to try and repair genetic material, and onward and so forth. So it's not an easy peasy solution here, and there's not one fit for all. But there is with everything that gets us involved, and that's where most would say, I don't want to be political. I don't want to go into exopolitics. I don't want to start this journey of learning how to deal with extraterrestrials and why they're here and what the agenda is. We have already had a lot of good suggestions to that. And my suggestion to that is that perhaps 30% of these encounters are from the secret military projects, let me call them that. For me, the secret military projects are with human operators that have been enhanced with alien genetics. So that's a different agenda than what most people know of. That's the angle I have on it. It's not just everyday Brian or Joe down the corner that has been part of the military and now in secret or SAP programs where they don't special access programs where they don't know what they're dealing with due to it's above your clearance, it's above this tier of information that you're allowed to have or not to have. That's not what we're talking about here. It's not just about reverse engineering of alien spacecraft into stealth technology and military technology that will be rolled out within the next 5 years, which is part of the things that are going on our planet right now, dropping and dumping all the old technology specific places so new technology can be implemented, along with the rolling out of the UAPs that will then give the grounds for this new technology to be rolled out. Because yes, we have got extraterrestrial threat here. So not only are we now funding it, but we're also talking about it, and we're also making it part of the collective human awareness. And with that, since we are now classifying it as a threat, we can then roll out the next level of technology as we saw it after Second World War, where the computers were implemented into our reality. They were part of some of the more secret programs during Second World War, including the whole moon project and other advanced technologies that were rolled out for certain what we call crises and situations where there was a threat assessment. So with that understanding, those of you who are now diving into this podcast series, because there are so many good people out there that are giving so many different angles and are discussing so many different levels of reality for whatever purpose and reason, whatever they feel drived to do, let me put it that way, whatever they feel pushed to do, whatever they feel is their approach to the collective challenges that we have as a humanity. And for me, it's a little bit like when we talk about the environmental changes, which I kind of got a little bit thrown off before, is that we get told you need to do this, you need to do that, and then we're doing it, and then we're seeing nothing is really happening. It's not really changing anything. We're up against time. We have the scientific community that told us 10 years ago that we had plenty of time, and now we suddenly discover we don't have plenty of time. We have got voices that says, oh, this is not a threat, this is actually beneficial, this is for our higher good, or whatever you want to put it. I say it's much more complex than that. It's not either or, it's not black or white. This is a muddy water where we need to learn to swim in a kind of a pool of mud where we can't see what we're dealing with. We have got sometimes lightning storms, other times we've got sunny weather. When it's sunny weather, we can see a little bit more clear. Other days we can't see anything. We don't know what's beneath us. We don't know what's coming. We can't see the shore yet. So we are in the unknowns of the unknown. We're trying to solve things we don't know what is. We have not been trained to it. We have been kept in the infantile state due to the old world order factions, treating us as children instead of doing their job to educate us, to foresee the breakdown of the original technologies that are upholding the Truman Show that we're part of. So this is where that's some of the themes I want to go into, whatever I'm allowed to go into. Because it's not just about me saying, oh, I got a good idea, I want to share this. This information is built upon some of the programs I have been pushed into that I didn't choose to get pushed into, some of the experience I had inside these programs, some of the things I've seen when I have released some of the old souls through the gate system, some of the encounters I've had with some of the different extraterrestrial groups that are here that has left. And when they leave, they do what's called a giving over. That means that the colonizing races, as they leave, they give back the keys to the house that are rightfully ours. They give back what is rightfully our heritage. And since I'm one of the original solar system civilizations, still standing, still remembering where I come from, then I am one of the go-to persons being given these keys. Not that I can use them for much. It's like getting keys to houses that have been run to the ground, squatter houses that is of no use, and all I can do is clear it out and clean up the mess that they have left behind. From that understanding, that's where I'm talking. So I'm not talking on behalf of any faction. I'm talking on the behalf of being part of civilization that failed, that's long gone, and we're few one standing left, but it's part of our heritage. This is our solar system, and what are we to do about that? And with that voice, I would like to invite all of you from the different projects, the different groups, wherever you're from, wherever you're here, first and foremost to recognize why you're here. Why don't you remember why you're here? Were you brought here on the freighter ships? Were you brought here due to war? Were you dropped here because you came from a system where you were no longer of use as part of the different weird programs that are going on here? Are you here because you're doing an awakening process as part of the original restoration program? Are you here because you were put here as a part of a science project from some of the parallel systems, and onward and so forth? So part of the awakening process is not just to realize politically or factionally, if we can call it that, or extraterrestrially, or whatever is going on of what we could call shenanigans. I normally just call it that to avoid the more frustration and feeling victimized about what's going on. But also go into the understanding of we are in a soup of a very complex scenario where a lot of difficult decisions have to be made. And if we are going to go with the original ways of asking everybody to join forces and their capacities into finding solutions, well, then the discussion must begin with what is the problem? What is it that we need to do? What is the triage here? What are the assessment? What is needed to be done? What is the project really about? What is it that we need to learn so we can fulfill the project goals? What's the strategy here? What do I, as a personal co-worker on planet Earth, in the company we call Earth, what do I need to learn? How do I need to educate myself so I can live up to the requirements of this project? What's the application I need to do? How do I get to the point where I actually can do an application? And I'm using this analogy because I also have a background within human resource management, as well as hiring and headhunting, and being a consultant in businesses that were headhunting for the bright minds to take specific positions within specific businesses. So we're also diving into what are the business and new built business culture. What is the kind of the social innovative business culture that we need to develop? So we have got so many different angles we can begin to work on. But it all comes down to people that wake up one morning and say to themselves, I want to be part of Planet Earth, Project Planet Earth. I want to be part of Project Better Future for All Humanities. I want to be part of that project that actually finds the solutions, not by finding fancy solutions via technology, but by becoming the solution, by changing who and what we are into being the solution themselves, ourselves. We are the solution by our energy system, by our awareness potentials, by our ways of working with reality, by our ways of dealing with the challenges of reality, by recognizing the challenges that we have ahead of us, and not just being like headless chickens running around, or being like the emu sticking our head in the ground and thinking that we have hidden ourselves from whatever's coming our way, by moving out of the denial culture, by moving out of the I am so woke because I know what's going on in the bipartisan swing door politician era of whatever's going on with different political front figures that are literally not making any sense. Remember, I'm from the good old school where we actually had politicians that were actually politicians and not just career politicians, swing door politicians as I call them, going in and out, where it was not the bureaucracy that were running the scene behind the swing door politicians, but actually groups that were highly educated, and what we call people that had good solid background within understanding what society was about. Yes, it's still a program. Yes, it's still a socio-economical program, but at least they were educated within it and not just doing their service to self, promoting me as some kind of new reality star, getting the likes and the big shots, doing photos with whoever is now on the top of the wake movement, being the next special person that will give that air of, yes, he or she has the solution, the next guru in spe, whatever that means, the next one to follow, just to see them crash and burn on social media. So Me is not just about what this is about. And it's not just about Me Too either, just to touch ground with that one. So we have all of these subcurrents. And what does that mean for us? And that's why I would like to make it into a podcast series where, with the knowledge I have, we can look at all of these things from a completely different angle. And it's not the full picture. and it's not the truth. It's just another way of looking at these things that you hear so many other people talk about as well, from their angle of understanding. For those of us who do this work, what does that mean that we have so much information? It's a training. It's a training where you learn to grow out of your linear way of thinking and learn to think in patterns, learn to think in processes, learn to do system thinking. As we had already Andre Valet talking about that ages ago. This is where we learn to think like quantum computers, not that we are to become it, but we need to learn to think about cause and effect and possibilities and probabilities. When I make that choice, what does that lead to, and on so forth.
Well, this is such a great introductory overview of this, and I thought I would maybe jump in here with some core questions of maybe where we can take this and state them a different way a little bit, but kind of the same thing of what you've already covered. And this, depending on how far we want to deep dive into each of these and how slow and how long we want to make this series, or how fast and quick. So just jumping in there so like you mentioned, what's wrong now? The devil, things are okay, Randy. Yes, there's a lot of things wrong in the world, but I'm okay. What do I really need to get involved in? This notion of have to be able to see that I'm in a prison before I can even have a chance of getting out of a prison. And then what sticks out between so many people are saying so many things are wrong, right? So what's the value in that, and what is really, really, really wrong at the core? Like, what is the most important thing here? And then, what to do about it? The motivation factors, like how do we get people out of the path, taking the path of least resistance? So those are the I guess the starting point. And then what are the planned futures now? You've mentioned so many different agendas and things. So what are those comprehensive of that? What do people need to know in depth, and what can people just be briefed on? And then what are the alternative futures to that? Do we need to pool energy around kind of one imagined future? How many potential futures do we need? And then, of course, how do we best get from where we are now to there, and everything that's in the way to stop us? And of course, how do we measure our progress? How do we measure the effects of all these? Yeah. And so those are the, I think, core questions that come up around a series like this for me. You've already touched briefly on the overviews of those. So depending on where we want to take this and what is important from them,
okay,
that's what I've got so far.
In this podcast, I would like you to ask the first question again.
Sure. What's wrong now? That's where we first got to start at. If we don't even realize we're in a prison, how can we possibly even get out of a prison?
Yeah. Or
what's the problem? What is the most important thing to address too? And
yeah. So first I want to go in here and say this against my psychotherapeutic training, as well as when we talk about within a business culture. We talk about this as a project that is to lead to progression. So the first thing that I would say, why am I driven to do this? Because I live in Denmark. And you know that, Josh, because you're living here with me in Denmark. It's a beautiful country. Everything is calm. Everything is settled down. And people are apparently one of the happiest countries in the world. We have got health insurance. It's not what we could call, what is it that the Americans say? It's not a Russian, mini Russia. That's nothing to do.
So a welfare state or a socialist state. It's not like that.
Well, it is a welfare state, but it's not whatever the American politicians, sure, the Republicans are painting it is not what it is. It's just
socialism
because
or something,
but they don't understand the way the democratic foundation of this world that we're living. That's part of old Europe. And the Americans, when they went to America, sorry for going down that route, but it's needed to be understood, was from rags to riches. It was the land of opportunity. The ones that went to America, whether it was free will or they were shipped there due to crime or because we had overpopulation in Europe at the time, so it was easy to ship crooks to Australia or to America.
Some people
Yes.
Political freedom, maybe.
Yes, and others.
Or religious freedom,
Yeah,
actually,
and
yeah.
others for religious
Sure.
freedom, because there were these fanatic groups that were in Europe at the time. The what do you call it? Puritanism. We didn't want that either. So in that was, when I say we, I'm talking about the brotherhoods of Europe, of the old world order. So they didn't want that here, and for very good reasons, because some of the ones that went to the States, they were founded in what we could say different forms of ritualistic practices that were calling in energies from the 2-8 pillar. And I'll just leave it at that and say that that's where they drove their foundation. That's where they drove their grid work possibilities when they went to the States, including erasing the original existing humanities that were living there, that were part of the older Lemurian projects. So in a way, we could say the ones that were administering the quote-unquote next level of humanity that was supposed to be seated, the sixth root race that was supposed to be seated in America, were hijacked long before it even came into fruition. So that's one piece of the puzzle. But when we go back to Denmark and we say that everything is so calm and nice here, which it is, it's well ordered.
Friendly.
We pay a high level of tax, so we pay as a joint group to pay for the joint bill of what it means to take care of the weaker in society. It's good Christian principles. It's based upon good Christian principles, but loaded up with what we could call socio-democratic ideas, as well as liberal ideas. There's also liberal ideas here. So we have the different types of political systems that you have in the States, or you have in Australia, you have in Britain, or wherever. So it's not a infused mini Russia or whatever has been portrayed as in Scandinavia, not at all. This is actually what we call the Scandinavian model, actually goes in to support the well-being of every human. We are not having water that is infused with all sorts of interesting stuff. There's no fluoride in our water. It's healthy water. It's free for all. We don't pay tax on the water. We get it freely. We can drink it from our taps without getting sick or ill by it. It's run by the state, so it's governed as being healthy, and we know it's being monitored very highly. Food is clean. We don't have GMO. So the general health of the population is very important for the governmental systems in the Scandinavian model to take care of their citizens, to ensure that they get a high level of education. We have got one of the best educational systems in the world. So if we do the Maslow pyramid, we're here talking about that our foundational needs are met. We have to work very, very hard to live in the street in Denmark because we've got so many support systems. So it's literally, you have to choose it, whether it's due to schizophrenia or different forms of psychopathological diseases. We could call it that. I don't agree on that one fully, but let's just call it that. That's the base program saying. So you have to push yourself out of the support systems.
It's not as profit driven.
Yeah, exactly. It's driven by, we generally want to do good here in Denmark. We also have the downside of what we call janteloven, which is a kind of a law where you don't stand out. You don't stick out, you don't stand out, you just keep your head down and do like everybody else. So being a private contractor or innovator or pioneer in Denmark is not that easy. That's been my challenge in a way. So when I now am in what we would say, if we look into a better future for all, then the model of Scandinavia would be the better future for all. And that's what it was made for to begin with. So it is already here. But when I then go in as a person with a mind that is neurodivergent, not that I am on the spectrum or anything, my mind just works in different ways. Then I go in and I look at all of this, abundance that we have in Denmark, and yet things are still off. People they just get complacent in all of that abundance. They get lazy in all of that abundance. It all just comes down to the little allotment they have and what's on television Friday night and how can I earn more money, by the way. And producing offspring, very important.
And at the same time, not much incentive to earn a lot more or do a lot more because the tax rate is so high too.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the same time, income inequality is not very vast like it is in other countries. There's not a huge rich class and not a huge poor class.
Yeah.
And not much incentive to break out of that either.
Exactly. And if we then go and say, if I live in Africa or any other place on the planet where there is drought and there is not the opportunity to not necessarily earn money, but a completely different system where every day is literally at the bottom of the Maslowian pyramid, where just is all about getting food on the table and not starve to death, or fight different types of infectious diseases, or whatever it is that are in these different countries, or under a very strong religious regime, or whatever's going on our planet. So the first part of the awareness of why do we want things to change? And that's a good old Dalai Lama practice. And that is to look at all the suffering that is everywhere in the world, not just where we are locally. Because if I was just looking locally as where I am in Denmark, well, then I got a very beautiful life. I got a beautiful place to live. I'm in a society that sustains me and supports me. As long as I play by the Jantelov and not sticks too far out, as long as I pay my tax and live as a good citizen, there's a huge amount of trust to the government and into citizens on a general level, even though that the political system here is also being undermined and people are now questioning, can I trust the politicians? So we are getting into the American model of distrust, of not trusting what's been given as information of news. That's not being whatever's handed out there. People look to other sources. And in that, in a way, I remember when I was doing when we talk business culture and we're talking upgrades of businesses, then there was a period of time where the business culture in the West was looking to the Japanese model of efficiency, and we said, oh, they're so efficient. Yeah, but we kind of missed the whole cultural difference. We are not from Japan, and we don't live by the cultural rule sets of Japan. We are so different. We enjoy personal freedom. We enjoy personal free thinking. We enjoy the freedom of speech. We have a different culture. We are not tied to an old samurai imperial culture. Our country is completely different put together. So we can't implement a model that belongs to another country and say it belongs here. Similar as we can't take the American model, for those who are listening in Denmark that are listening to podcasts in America, we can't just say, oh, the same rules apply here as they do in America, and vice versa.
And I think another important thing to throw in here is we've mentioned mostly external things.
Yeah.
So this inner-outer distinction, and then where they blur, and how this kind of runs through everything, and how they're a little bit inseparable, but in a way we can separate them out depending on how. So I just want to throw that dynamic in here.
Yes, but you ask, why should we do the work? And
Yes.
for people that are not connected to their inner worlds, that are not connected to the subtle levels of their physicality and their psychological dynamics, that does not have the access yet, that are not even begin to breach into their subconscious, that not even begin to done the psychological work of their traumas from childhood, less to say gone into past lives and what they're controlled by. They will begin in everyday life. They will begin in this world as we have it. And that's why we begin now.
And that's another thing I want to throw in here too, framing this, is the different levels. So
Yeah.
starting from zero like that on through to where what it could possibly be.
Yes. Because one of the arguments of the old world order spiritual teaching system is that you can't really pull the child into from the secure nursery and into the roughness of the world and see, here, deal with it, thrown in the deep end, and then you learn to deal with whatever's there because you have a mind of a 5-year-old. So you need to train the mind to be able to work with these complex information systems. And the first step in that one, the first challenge I give you out there to take responsibility of being part of Project Planet Earth is to look at the different countries. You have from the news, but many of you have been desensitized into just looking at it. Oh yeah, just another bombing. Oh, there's just another war. Or there's just another hunger scheme. Or you have perhaps been in a way controlled into thinking of this as part of false flag programs. It doesn't really happen, does it? Or these kind of ideas as we have have also heard different people talk about that the Second World War didn't happen, or something like that, or in the movie Interstellar, where the moon landings were a kind of a project that were made so the military industrial complex could build machines or what have you, so the moon landing never happened. Well, we don't know technically, but just saying, so this is where, as the first step of this project, of this new, what we could say, strategical project of involvement and responsibility and growth potentials. So that's the incitement for you. This is giving me growth potentials. This is lifting me from what we could say a more closed Truman Show way of living, because Truman was living in a beautiful world, and for those of you who forgot the movie, you can find it on YouTube or I think Internet Archive or something. You can find it out there for free. Watch it and then see yourself in that role as Truman. You wake up every morning, your life is happy, you got a beautiful wife, you got a beautiful house, you got a beautiful car, you got a beautiful dog, you have got all the right things, you go to work, it's a beautiful work, you are there, you're being valued, but you have something that nags you. What is it that nags Truman? What nags Truman is that he ran into this girl who actually told him that they're using you, they're exploiting you. You are born into this program. You're not really seeing the reality as it is. This is not your world. You're in a completely artificial construction made for you. There are observers outside that are looking at you, using you as entertainment, using you to play out different scenarios so they get their emotional kick, so they get this feeling of being part of another person's life that's more successful, that's more real, that has more emotions, that are going through the same ideas and traumas and life as we are, as we see in the whole social media culture, living vicariously through other people and their lives, and then feeling that we're better success because I'm following the new post that they put every day. That's the Truman Show. Watch that one again. Go in and watch it and see he's there and he's happy because he doesn't know. He's a child. He's like the children, not knowing, living, and then the ones that are outside living through him, seeing what's going on, and by this transfer, feel that they are living this special life too, so they forget their own life, whatever that is. So when we go in and say, that's the Truman, that's the plot of the Truman Show, and then he begins to wake up, and then he begins to realize the entrapment that he's in, the entanglement that he's in, and he has to go through different challenges himself. He has to do different awakening processes himself, not just by beginning to ask the right questions, but also begin to look at the world around him and see how staged it is, how much everything is like a program, as in like when we wake up in the morning, the reality program around us kicks in. We don't really know what's going on at nighttime. We say, well, I stay awake, then I know what's going on. No, you're just interacting with the reality program that's then being played out for you, because there are, like in the Truman Show, there are drones and cameras and what have you everywhere in the fourth dimension. And people say, I don't want to wake up to that. I prefer my Truman Show, as we know from the movie The Matrix, with the guy that takes the pill that gets back because I want to taste how a beef tastes. I want to taste how wine tastes. I want to live this life without knowing, because the real world is harsh. It's broken down. It's machine worlds. It's world wars, destruction, dustification. And I had dreams about that when I was a kid, where I was in a house and I was pushed out by actually 2 men in black that were knocking at my door, a dream. And I ran out the back door and everything was demolished. So this world and the original holographic network is not in a good state either. So we are not waking up to a happier life. Similar when Truman walks out the door of the set, and he opens the door and he walks out. He walks into the unknown. He doesn't know what he walks into. Will he walk into a better world? Well, he has the goal of the girl, right? He goes for the girl. That's what gets him out of his trouble. So that we could say is a kind of a way of awakening for men, perhaps, or females, and get the perfect partner or the twin soul or whatever. Sorry, I'm just going down a drill here. But you are asking, Josh, why should we do it when everything is so seemingly perfect? And the answer to that one is, what drove Truman to do? What drove Truman to wake up? He had all the right conditions. He was being completely what we could say conditioned into Pavlovian conditioning into believing his world was the best. He was completely grown up inside that reality program that in all ways and forms were perfect. And yet something was not perfect.
Well, what's the point of living a lie? At the point he realized he was living a lie,
yeah,
then why do people continue to choose to live a lie?
If they don't know it.
Well, first they have to know it, but then some people might even know it and continue living a lie then, lying to themselves. Another point that came up was just about everything in our external world is a fabrication of some sort, meaning that it has first been conceived in the mind and then created. So then when we lose track of the fact that everything on the external has been, fabricated from mind and established, and then once we get involved in it and forget that that's the case, then these problems can arise. So that's one of the things.
I want to stay here and just answer that question.
Please,
because I think it's important here, and that's why people say, oh yeah, we get the point, Randy. You don't need to push it so forth and into these processes. But what I'm here suggesting to you out there listening to this podcast, first and foremost, snap out of finding solutions. Snap out of quick fix, as in kind of ordering on Amazon the enlightenment kit that will give you 5 classes and then 5 minutes of inner work, and then you do the tools and the bells and the bowls and the sounds and the cards and what have you, and then you're good to go, and then you can go back and watch Netflix or whatever you want to do, and then all things is good. This is a different mindset. That's why I want to do, and people say, no, I don't want to look at it from a work perspective because I don't like work. We have issue with people don't want to work anymore, right? They want to be on YouTube and listening to Randy Green podcasts. No, but so it's a different way of looking at work. For me, work is the ability to transform energy. It is to undo the effects of the timeline event. And that's where I'm coming from. I have a very, very long line of memory that leads back to why we are in the situation that we're in now, and some of the projects that were put in place to undo the effects of the timeline event, or as most people know of today from science, the Big Bang, where frequency energies were pushed into our reality from the previous universal cycles. So for me, of course, I have a different perspective of why it's important. So I'm trying to speak to people that do not have that memory, that have not recalled who and what they are, that does not feel that they are something else, that has not had that weird, as I had ever since I was a kid, of not belonging here. Not because I was a depressed child due to severe trauma, because if I look at my childhood, it was quite similar like any other middle class home, with the usual problems that most middle class homes and families have, and relationships and marriages and what have you. So what was the difference was my interpretation of it, my already be clairvoyant, me already having the greater understanding of this is not real, this is not how it's supposed to be, and why is it not that way. So I had this foundational feeling of something is off. And a lot of people have that today, similar like Truman, something is off. You get snippets here, get snippets there, and as Truman also shows, he denies it at first because it doesn't match up with what he knows of the world. So the first line of this process is, as I began before that, is that yes, everything is perfect around us here in the West. We have other places in the world where things are not perfect. They are struggling just to survive. So in a way, they have enough on their plate right now. They just need to get food on the table. And that's some of the things when we talk about, in general, West at large, most of us, not everybody, I know there are many different groups within the Western world as well, but compared to other places on the planet, not that we are to go in, I talked about that before, and say, oh, we're so much better in the West, so we'll give all the solutions. We got our own problems, we got our own issues. But our issues are in a way psychological more than actual physical as things are right now. I know there are groups that are very much every day, just surviving every day. And I acknowledge that. And that's also some of the things we need to look into. So what I'm here proposing is that those of us who are in what we call a better environment, that was like me here in Denmark, where a lot of the Maslowian lower level needs are already secured due to my choices, due to the way I live my life, due to the way I've arranged myself, as I talk about both in my class material as well as in the Changemaker material and the whole living material. We need to have the foundation in order first. So those of us who've gone through that process and have that, we are now on the next challenge where we begin to take responsibility for reality and others. And that's the project I'm inviting you into. Does that then mean you need to flood me with a lot of questions and comments and all sorts of private messages? No, it means that you begin in your everyday life and look at yourself from the angle of the Truman Show. Are you really participating in making the better futures possible? And what can you do as a human in your everyday life to make better futures possible? And if you ask that question, the next one that naturally will occur is, what is a better future? What does that mean? Because if the Scandinavian model is the apex of human civilization, what we can achieve in the Maslowian pyramid, where we begin to work with spiritual issues, and we discover that the psychological issues are not fully expanded into the extrasensory perception and the expanded awareness, and that spirituality that we're supposed to look into on the highest level of the pyramid is tailored into different types of reality programs, well, then we got a new challenge, don't we? And that's the process I want each and one of you to go through if I am to suggest that it's not about that our world is wrong or not good enough. It is a little bit what we could say, well, something is not really as it's supposed to be. You know it and I know it, but we don't really know what it is. And thereby, it's not about finding the solutions, because if we don't know what the problem is, we don't know what the solution is either. So we must embark on a process of education, a process of awareness, a process of expansion, a process of creating a new type of thinking, a process of creating new paradigms, a process of expanding our neural network, not just to work within the frequency spectrum, but evolving into the possibilities of what we call extrasensory perception that goes in with the many layers, the structural layers the brain has the capacity of. But not just doing the old Atlantean way that led to the fall of Atlantis, from service to self-orientation, but from the orientation of the highest good of the many, for repairing and healing of our own biology, our own higher order energy systems, the reality field itself, undo the effect of Big Bang. And once you begin to think that, then you say, okay, then the Einsteinian sciences are perhaps not our best friend, because it talks about limitations. It talks about we can only go so far if we use a momentum of energy that is based upon fossil fuels and onward and so forth. I want you, if I can ask you to be part of this project as a project manager of this project, to put in here those of you who are ready to embark on Project Earth and building bridges for better futures, is to the self-education, is to the going into the work that will lead to the expanded awareness, whatever your path is. I've got a solution for that in the whole academy, but it doesn't mean that that's the one that works for you. So what does it take you to get into being a good co-worker that is part of planet Earth? And I'm not here talking about co-worker as someone is above you and are putting you into a contract and pay your bills, but as a responsible, mature citizen that are aware of that your every being and whatever you are as a person affects not only you, but others and the reality field you're part of. That you as a person, if you change, you can change your environment around you by just being a different person, by being energetically different, by clearing the distortion of your fields, by educating yourself into the higher awareness sciences, by understanding the true dynamics of reality in the higher order science reality dynamics, by beginning to work with the holographic principles where everything's enveloped in each other, in patterns, in entanglement, in possibilities and probabilities, and not linear, I got a problem, then I need to find a solution A to B, but actually go through the entire spectrum and understanding what it means to work on all these different levels of the reality, that each dimension has its own challenge, its own knowledge, its own science, and you need to learn that before you can go to the next and the next and the next, as we learned as kids. Making that grown-up process, the maturing process that we should have done a long, long time ago, 3,000 years ago. So we are a little bit behind the time scale here to achieve what we need to achieve, to address some of the challenges that is needed to build better futures for all, that does not lead into the new Atlantis under the fifth dimensional races, that does not lead into the transhuman agenda of the now new colonizing races that are coming in from the fourth dimension and onward and so forth.
I would encourage people to not discount their choices. Everyone's individual choices, drop by drop, they can add up. And the way we view the world too. I also encourage people to, share these ideas, be it online or just gauge the interest of people around you with any of the things that really resonated with you, and see what other people think of this in your daily life and how they respond to it, kind of what input they have, and maybe see where some of the distortions are within ourselves and within others, and how to best address those too.
Yeah, I would say there, though, for those of us who've been, not to dismiss what you're saying, Josh, because yes, of course, but do it with peers to begin with.
Yes.
Because one of the things I remember from some of my students years ago, back in 2017, was that they become always like missionaries. They were out preaching the new agenda, preaching the new knowledge, and that's not the way to go.
No, this is first you realize who you're dealing with, what level they're on, and
that's a whole other discussion. Could we put that into another podcast?
Let's do that.
Yes, because that is also a way of when we work with
how do we ask questions to people to gauge interest in the level that they're at?
Should we? Yeah. Should we even?
Yeah, good point.
Yes. So the first step of all of this work is always to get your own house in order first. You need to clean up your own mess before you go out and point out the mess of others. As I said in the Gospels, the beam why do you see the beam in the splinter in other people's eyes when you're not seeing? Or the hope is that said you point with one finger, you got three fingers that point in your own direction.
Sure.
So I would like us not to go out and preach. I'm sorry, I'm countering what you're saying
what you
there.
said, the peers, that's really good. Yeah.
So for those of you who are now already in existing groups where you are doing the awakening process, where you are working with the ascension material, where you are working with multidimensional awareness, this is not about who's better, who's worse. It's not about the segregation dynamics of the fifth dimension and polarity. This is not what I'm asking of you. But I'm asking of you, as I talk about in the whole academy material, how do we instigate processes of change? How do we learn to work on 6 levels of different ways of working with energy? Because there are 6 levels. These are the first 6 dimensions. And I teach that in the whole academy, the transition course material, how to operate with an expanded neural network where we incorporate the higher order senses, not just to reach our guides or to work with timelines or to get connected to an alternate reality field, Andromeda system, or alien encounters or whatever it is, but actually go in and say, this is the expanded version of the psychodynamics that leads into a higher awareness. And also at the same time, what is higher awareness? It's not just about sitting in bliss and samadhi and feeling enlightened and feel I'm better than everybody else. Sorry for putting it that way. But in a way, when people reach these states, they come out, I'm so calm, I'm so compassionate. And that's a huge part of the path of learning the self-nurture, self-healing. We'll talk about that later as well. But it is to the understanding of why I want to talk here is to initiate processes that leads to a higher scientific mindset that is imbued with empathy, with the true understanding of what compassion really means. Not just about being kind all the time, but what is kindness really? And what does it really mean to take responsibility for the project that we're part of getting our planet, our solar system, from what it is now out of the Truman Show, doing the transition into the true worlds that are not just spiritual, that are much, much more than that. And what does that mean? So the first step of any good discussion or discourse or whatever we embark on is the educational level. And many people have already got a lot of education. But now we're thrown into a new paradigm where we are no longer discussing whether or not the aliens are here. We are now discussing the aliens are here and their technology is here. So what does that demand of us? What's the next step of the process? What does that demand of you as a human being that actively take part in the processes and the discussions to find the joint solutions that we are to agree upon as a planetary civilization of where we want to go into the future. So that's where I want to go with this. Thank you.